Welcome to Australia, where you're always welcome to embrace our lifestyle while you learn from the best and the brightest, where innovative ideas and clever collaborations are always welcome, where you're welcome to join our world-class institutions and all they have to offer in the most unique classrooms on the planet. Welcome to new adventures, near and far, where you're welcome to thrive, to explore your limits, as you set off on a journey towards making your dreams and aspirations a brilliant reality. Australia, welcome.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. On behalf of Study Australia, I would like to thank you all for joining us for our high school counsellor information session. My name is Hope Baylis and I'm from the University of Western Australia. So we will start today's session with a brief presentation from myself, followed by a panel discussion with representatives from universities around Australia, and then an interactive Q&A. We encourage you to ask your questions throughout the session, and you can ask the question via the AirTouch device, which is located on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Click on the device and type in your questions. If someone has asked a question that you really like, give it a thumbs up and bump it to the top of the list. After the session, I do encourage you to head to the exhibition hall to visit all of our panelists and all of the other institutions who are participating today. You can live chat with representatives from all of these institutions at the booths and download any resources as well. Next slide, please. So I would like to, before I begin my formal presentation, I would like to introduce my panel and acknowledge my colleagues joining me today. So we have Sushant Sareen, who is the International Regional Manager from Bond University, who will be responding to your questions via the Q&A. We also have Joimini, Senior Recruitment Advisor from the University of Sydney, Beldina, Muasya, Regional Marketing Manager from Griffith University, John Dixon, Regional Manager from the University of Melbourne, Francis Mwaura, from the Regional Business Development Manager from the University of New England. Okay. So why do students love studying in Australia? There are plenty of reasons why students choose and love Australia, but here are some of the standout reasons. So the first one is, of course, the environment. So Australia is a safe, welcoming and multiculturally diverse environment. 6 of the Australian cities have been ranked in the top 35 student cities in the world. The next is our quality. So 95% of Australian universities are globally ranked, and this world-class research does cascade down to our undergraduate students. The next is the protection and rights. So Australia is one of the few countries to protect the rights of international students through its Education Services for Overseas Students, or ESOS, legislation. The next is, of course, that student experience. So between university clubs and societies, student ambassador programs, exchange programs, and work rights while studying, Australia does provide the opportunity for a rich experience for anyone coming in and studying here. The next is employability. So internships, job readiness programs, mentor programs, and access to job fairs help our students achieve their career success once they graduate. And the last is the post-study work opportunities. So there are ample opportunities for graduates to apply for a range of post-study work visas once they have graduated from university. Next slide, please. So Australia has 41 universities, which are located across 6 states and 2 territories. And these universities are located in both major cities as well as regional centres. Each of them provide unique opportunities for your students to study in a multitude of locations. Next slide, please. In Australia, our university academic year typically starts with the calendar year. So most universities will have 2 semesters with intakes in both February and July. There are some universities, though, that also offer trimesters with that third intake, which typically falls around September, October. So next slide, please. So for most university courses, applications for international students are accepted on a rolling basis, with applications opening sometimes up to 2 years in advance. Direct entry into most courses are based on students meeting the minimum academic scores. For example, this can be met in programs such as their A-levels, their CBSE, IB, ACT, SAT, and AP. English language requirements can be met either in their subject scores or via other English language tests such as IELTS or TOEFL. Personal statements and letters of recommendation are not required for the majority of courses, and the same applies for interviews and additional entrance exams, with the exception of some programs such as medicine. Next slide, please. So how to apply for international students? Unlike some other countries, students can apply directly to each institution. As you can see with the graphic on your screen now, generally this process follows this pattern. Students will research their course by either looking at the university websites or talking to a university representative, and then apply directly to that institution or using a educational representative or agent that works with the university. Students will then receive their letter of offer, and once they accept that offer and make payment, they will then receive their confirmation of enrolment or COE. And this document is used to apply for their student visa. And that approximately is the rough process for most applications for students. Next slide, please. If you do have any students who we would consider to be domestic students, the application process is a little different. Domestic students don't typically apply directly to the university. Instead, they apply via a tertiary admissions centre for the state or territory that their preferred university is located in, as you can see from the list on your screen now. They can apply to multiple universities within that state using a preference system. Each state has specific deadlines for applications. So if you do have any domestic students, feel free to ask your university representative for more information on how to apply. Next slide, please. So the tuition fees will vary depending on the course of study and the program level. This is just a broad indication that you can see on your screen now of what the average fees are for international students this year. In addition to the annual tuition fee, or the course tuition fee, the annual living costs in Australia will vary, and depending on where the student is living and obviously their lifestyle choices. Currently, we do recommend that students budget between 20,000 to 40,000 Australian dollars per year. And as I said, this will vary depending on their lifestyle, where they choose to live, and so forth. Next slide, please. So one final point I would like to leave you with in this presentation is that Australia is directly connected to many places within the region. There are direct flights to Australia from Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Doha, many of which are the same distance, if not closer than flying to places such as New York and Toronto, as you can see with the flight times listed on the screen now. Next slide, please. Okay, so this was a very top-level overview of studying in Australia. If you would like to find out more information, please make sure to visit studyaustralia.gov.au. You can also reach out directly to the university representatives who are more than happy to assist you with any questions. And of course, make sure you visit the Study Australia virtual fair after the session today. Next slide, please. Okay, that brings me to the end of my presentation. So with that, I would like to introduce you to the panel again. Next slide, please. So assisting with the Q&A is Sushant Sareen from Bond University. On the panel, we also have Joimini from the University of Sydney, Beldina Muasya from the Griffith University, John Dixon from the University of Melbourne, and Francis Mwaura from the University of New England. Okay, and with that, let's get started. So, students who are thinking about studying internationally have a broad range of options available to them, and with so many different types of degrees as well. Australia is no different. So, Joimini, perhaps you could explain some of the different types of degrees offered in Australia.
Great. Yes, thanks all for bringing this question towards me. I would like to start with the general degrees that are offered across all countries in all destinations. That is just the associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and the research degrees. But given that the undergraduate years are one of the best years of your life, and trust me when I say this, that this is the time when you can explore everything you wish to do or wish to pursue later in your life. This is also the best time for students to kind of explore interdisciplinary skills and knowledges. And with that, we do, like many universities in Australia, offer dual degrees. Now, the nomenclature may be different. Some university may call it a dual degree, some may call it a double degree, some may term it a flexible double or flexible major in combined in one bachelor's degree. But whatever the nomenclature, the point is that all the universities, what they offer is an interdisciplinary approach towards the bachelor's degree. Now, a flexible degree opens a world of new possibilities. Let's say you choose your primary field of study and try other disciplines that suit your goal or taste and helps explore your passion. So, a flexible dual degree typically needs to be completed within 4 years of academic study. For example, if you choose to do medicine and pharmacy courses, that can take longer. But let's say you want to integrate your Bachelor of Arts with a major in criminology or a major in international relations, that might be completed within the 4 years mark against the typical 3 year single degree programs in Australia. A combined integrated bachelor's and master's degree is also a possibility that takes 5 academic years of study, while a double master's program can be completed between 2 to 2.5 years with credit exemptions as a possibility, when you have studied from a same cognate discipline at your undergraduate degree. So the best advantage of pursuing a dual degree, in my opinion, is that it's easier to make contacts with academics, learn various skills apart from your own field of study, and also network with professionals from different countries within both the programs. So this helps you flourish your networking skills, enlarges your network, and also enhances your job opportunities as employers typically targets candidates with interdisciplinary knowledge. And that also shows how adaptable you are to newer things or to newer environment and changes. I myself, I've personally done double majors in my master's degree, so I can totally bet that this was one of the best experiences of my academic career. And many students, I have known students who are doing a Bachelor of Science, but is also doing a Bachelor of Music together because they want to study harmonics and do research in the oscillation field of studies later on in their career. So yes, it does definitely open up greater opportunities and, of course, more flexible thinking and creative ideas. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Joimini. It's definitely worth highlighting that the degree options available really do provide a flexible approach to learning. Beldina, did you have anything you'd want to add or expand on to Joimini's answer?
Hi, everyone. My name is Beldina. I'd be excited to add on to that. Joimini did a fantastic job explaining how the double degrees tend to give a student a better standing, definitely. And for most parents who are looking, and for most students who are looking to study out there, the question always comes back to ROI, return on investment. And the ability to have double degrees allows for a student to be, I believe, more marketable and be able to pursue and be able to make sure that they learn about their different interests. The other part of it as well is the fact that for most students, by the time they're leaving their high school, they're usually not sure if they will be brilliant at one thing or the other. They have diverse interests. So the ability to have double degrees can tend to give students quite an edge that way, because it gives them a chance to be able to pursue all of them. And as we know, university is about discovery, finding yourself. So the ability to have double degrees at most Australian universities gives us quite an edge that way, and gives a student quite a better standing, I'd say.
Thank you so much. Whilst we're discussing course-related content, one aspect we do get asked about is the opportunity for internships and work experience. Francis, are you able to give us some examples of how this is incorporated into the course and student experience?
Of course, I can. Thank you for that, Hope. One thing I would like to encourage the counselors when you're talking, really do encourage students to consider taking internships and work placements as part of their degree. And the reasons for that is obviously it gives them tangible, valuable experience that they can then put in their resume. And that goes a long way in trying to help them get job opportunities when they graduate. But in terms of how that is offered within the universities, there are some programs that have an inbuilt placement or internship programs. And more you see Australian universities now moving what they're calling work-based training, where most degrees within universities do have an internship placement incorporated. And if it does not have, most universities would have what they call an international students placement center, where you can go and encourage students to go and talk to them, because those people there, all the staff there, are really good at helping students look outside of the universities to partners or business partners that the university partners with that can possibly have some internships opportunities where they can take placements.
Thanks. Joimini, in addition to what Francis has already said, so universities do offer some support finding internships. Do you know if many of these are paid internships?
That's one of the most frequently asked questions that we get. And thanks, Francis, you've summarized those points very accurately. Additional to what Francis said, yes, all universities in Australia definitely has a dedicated careers team who helps the students connect with employers and helps them build their CV, their resumes, their cover letters, and also prepares them to the extent of preparing for job interview. So the support that the students get from that perspective is pretty holistic, and every international student should take advantage of that, in my opinion. Having said that, yes, many degrees, as Francis said, has an inbuilt professional engagement program, and that really helps the students build that network or kind of get into the job market earlier than the others. And yes, while some internships, if you're lucky, might be paid, but the aim at this stage is kind of finding an internship with which you can gain the employment skills and the knowledge and the experience of working in a big scale or a small scale or a medium scale organization, because the learning that you have when you're on site in an organization, in an office with real team members, is incomparable with the amount of money that you get for those experiences. Yes, a few little extra bucks doesn't harm, but I think given that Australia is one of the very flexible countries where students are able to work while they are studying, and that kind of creates a source of income for them while they are studying, internships, in my opinion, should be more about gaining those critical skills to be employable in the job market. So yes, there is a possibility of finding some paid internships, but in my experience, as I've seen, most internships are usually you can chat more about this with your individual universities and the faculties, but how the internship hours translate is that you can claim them as credits, and recognition of those units can count directly towards your degree completion units. So if not money, that's still a prize that you're kind of getting, and a reward towards the total degree duration. So yes, that's my little bit into it.
I love the idea that the internship is like a reward towards your degree. That's a fantastic way of phrasing that. One thing we covered briefly in the presentation was admission requirements. Each university will have a different minimum entry requirement for their respective courses. So this isn't really something that we can go into detail right now. However, what are the options that are available to students who perhaps don't meet the direct entry requirements for their chosen degree? John, I might throw this question over to you.
Sure, thanks, Hope. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. So yeah, there are options for students who don't quite get the grades to get into the universities directly. Obviously, there's a range of international curriculums that students can take to that we will accept directly. But if students don't quite get those grades, or maybe they're even studying a national curriculum from the ones we've mentioned earlier, then students can still enter through a pathway program. Now, most universities will have their own pathway program within their institution, or perhaps students can take a pathway program with someone else and then always transfer. They do vary in length between institutions, and there's different programs within each of the pathway providers. But usually a one-year program will be suffice for a student to enter the bachelor degree of their chosen program.
Great. Thank you so much, John. So speaking of courses, one of the most popular course-related inquiries received is about medicine. Many universities do offer medicine courses here in Australia, and these programs do vary from institution to institution. Beldina, I know that Griffith University does offer medicine, so could you give me a quick overview of what this program is and how the students from high school can apply for medicine?
That's an excellent question, Hope. When we speak about medicine in Australia, ideally, most of the programs offer medicine, the Doctor of Medicine, as a postgraduate program. And specifically at Griffith, it's offered as a postgraduate program. So usually the student will start with a bachelor's degree, either in biomedical science or medical sciences. The difference between the two, the medical sciences would take about the biomedical sciences would take about 3 years. The difference is the entry requirements. Ideally, we don't want to lock out any kind of student that way. And then ideally, then be able to progress into Doctor of Medicine. Of course, before the progression into Doctor of Medicine in Australia, they'd have to sit for the GAMSAT, GAMSAT. That's the Graduate Medical School admission test. And usually with a score of about 61 to about 64, they're able to get the best chance to get an interview and be able to get into the Doctor of Medicine. It is available for international students. I am aware of many universities within Australia that offer this as well. The ability for an international student to be able to study directly for medicine. Now, the second part of it, and I think possibly the advantage of it, is that by the time you're going into Doctor of Medicine, you are able to already have the kind of exposure that you need. You're able to determine which area of medicine you might want to go into, especially because most of the bachelor's degrees would be very general to give you an idea and expose you in different markets. So you already have a degree, by the way, by the time you finish either the Bachelor of Biomedical Science or the Medical Sciences, and then you progress into Doctor of Medicine. Thank you, Hope.
Thank you so much, Beldina. Joimini, I also know the University of Sydney offers the MD. Is there anything else that you think students, in particular high school counsellors, should be aware of when they're considering medicine in Australia?
Yeah, thanks, Hope. I think Beldina has again summarized very accurately what is required, and that is consistent with most Australian universities. Additional to that, I think the one thing that counsellors need to communicate to the students is that studying medicine in Australia, it's actually 7 years long in duration, and that includes the first 3 years, as Beldina said, the first 3 years of the Bachelor of Science or the Bachelor of Medical Science, and then going on with the 4 years of Doctor of Medicine component. It is very intensive as a degree. Most Australian universities are very well ranked in this area, and the other flexibility, I think, again, the entry requirements vary from university to university. But the one thing that we can note here is that the entry requirements into each university, with or without the GAMSAT, varies very, very, it's a distinctive variation. So definitely do your research very, very well for all the individual universities. But the fact that it's a 7 years long degrees, contrary to the many countries which offers 5 years of direct MBBS, is one structural change which you will notice in Australia, studying medicine in Australia. Apart from that, I think it's pretty much well covered. Beldina, there is nothing more for me to add into this.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for your answers. Okay, so moving away now from the course-related questions, as you all know now, there are 41 universities spread out across Australia. I'm sure most people are probably familiar with some of the larger cities here in Australia, but Francis, the University of New England is located in what we would refer to as a regional centre. What do you think are the differences in studying regionally compared to studying in a metro destination?
Thanks, Hope, again, and a very complicated question to unpack, and I'll do my best to try and unpack it in a way that the counsellors will get a good grasp of what it is. So Australian cities or studying in Australia is divided into three. So you've got the major cities, and that's Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. And then you've got what they call cities and regional centers. And that's Toowoomba, Sunshine Coast, Newcastle, Geelong, Perth, Adelaide. So they come under cities and regional centers. And then you've got the really regional ones, and those are called regional areas. And those are universities that are in much, much smaller towns, generally towns that have a population of about 100 to 30,000 people. And an example of that would be the University of New England in Armidale, a small city of 30,000 people only. You got some universities like USQ, in Toowoomba, and other universities that are in much, much smaller towns. What are the advantages and disadvantages that we should be discussing with students in terms of helping them understand if a regional or a regional center is good for them, or if a metro or a city is best for them? I would break that into 5 components, and the first one would be the cost. So if a student really understands what their budget is, that if you're looking to study in the bigger cities, in the major cities, on-campus accommodation will cost you anything between $400 and $750 a week. In a regional center or a major city or regional center, that would be about $300 to $500. And with the regional areas, the universities that are in really small towns, then you can find on-campus accommodation for about $160 to $300 a week. The second component is employment. As some of my colleagues already mentioned, international students are allowed to work part-time while they study in Australia. And when it comes to looking for those part-time job opportunities, students who are in the bigger cities do tend to have many more opportunities. They have a diverse range of what type of jobs they can do because they are bigger economies with a lot of many different businesses, as opposed to the regional centers and regional areas where there is a little bit less opportunities. There might be little competition for those opportunities because the populations there are small. But we do need to make sure that we make it very clear to students that the smaller towns do tend to have fewer opportunities when it comes to job opportunities. That is compensated on the next point, which is another difference between studying in the bigger cities and the smaller cities is what we call post-study benefits, and that's divided into 2. So there's post-study work rights, and then we have post-study regional migration bonus points for those students who might be considering that as an option. Firstly, for those students who are studying in the major cities, Australia does offer international students who've done a 2-year degree or longer, a course that is 2 years or longer, which all degrees and master's degree would qualify into. They get a 3 years post-study work visa. For those who have studied in a major city, it's just a 3 years. For those who have studied in a city or a regional center, that would be 3 years plus 1 bonus year for studying in a smaller town. For those students who are studying in regional small towns, they get up to 5 years, made up of the 3 years post-study work visa and the 2 years additional bonus regional study years. If those students do wish to then maybe pursue an opportunity to work in Australia, to live in Australia, students who have studied in regional centers and regional areas are eligible for up to 10 regional study migration bonus points. And then students should be talking to migration lawyers who can help them with that, really not education, not the universities or the education agents. The last point I would cover in terms of the differences would be public transport. It's really good that we make sure that we advise the students and we tell the students the difference differences that if they're going to the major cities, it's not much of an issue because most cities are really have really well developed, public transport system, and most of them are synchronized. Where, for example, in New South Wales, with just one card, and I know this is the same for most of the states as well. The same card operates in the trains, in the buses, in the metros, in the light rail, or in the ferries as well. And most of the major cities also do have an international airport just nearby. In the regional cities, a little bit less developed, but I know most of them, for example, Sunshine Coast, do have tram lines and they do have light rails. Same thing with areas like Geelong. So not as complicated or as developed as the bigger cities, but they do have. And that's very different to regional towns, really small towns like Amador, where it's only the network that's available. And in these towns, we do normally encourage international students to consider maybe acquiring a second-hand affordable car. That way they do have an alternative transport means. And the last one would be recreational. In the bigger cities, students have a lot of things they can do. In the smaller towns, a little bit less, and in the regional towns, a little bit less. And that looks different across the range. If they are studying in Sydney, they have so many things they can do. There's so many cultural activities. Same thing with Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane as well. Whereas in regional towns, a little bit less, but there's a lot more they can do outdoors, because as most of you might know, Australia has one of the best outdoor scene, bushwalking, hiking, mountain climbing, and things like that. So there's a whole lot range of things that they can do. But those are the key differences and things that I think as education counselors and as school counselors, some key points to try and help students understand the differences between studying in a major town, in a regional center, and in a regional area. I hope that covers as much as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Francis, for that very comprehensive answer. It does sound like there is an option for every kind of student, depending on what they're interested in. Now, Francis did touch on it, but the cost of living is a factor that students have to take into consideration when choosing a study destination. And one of the ways is funding their study through scholarships. Australian universities do offer scholarships, but they may vary and be a little bit different to perhaps the scholarship programs in other countries like the US. John, are you able to explain the types of scholarships that students may find in Australia?
Sure, thanks, Hope. A really great, relevant question, because it's one that we all get asked so many times by a lot of our students. Scholarships is obviously really, really important. So similar to the way we discussed earlier about how when we ask for students to apply to the universities, we don't ask for recommendation letters or essays for our entry requirements. The same can be said for our scholarships. Many of our scholarships are automatically considered, and they're academic merit based. So students don't need to apply separately, and they don't need you to write any recommendation letters. They don't need to attend interviews or write an essay. They're simply assessed based on their grades from their high school. So when they apply, they'll be automatically assessed. There are, of course, many other scholarships that universities offer. So there might be some sporting scholarships or accommodation scholarships or other academic scholarships. Often a lot of the faculties will have their own scholarships depending on the course as well. But as a general rule, in most cases, then students will be automatically considered based on their high school grades. Thanks, Hope.
Thanks, John. So one thing I would say that is characteristic of Australia is our love for the outdoors and sports. So it's no surprise that this flows through into our student experience at university. Joimini, can you tell us about some of the extracurricular activities that are available to students who choose to study in Australia?
Sure, thanks for this. I think one of my best favorite questions to answer, and I'm very enthusiastic when I talk about this, is that Australia, as Australians, it's kind of globally known that we love our outdoor scenes. And what I mean with that is we have something to do outdoors for every season. We go out to the beach. There are plenty of water sports that we plunge into. If if it's like too cold or in the winter months, we can't stay home either. So we go hiking or bushwalking, and there are plenty more other barbecue things that we do by the beach if we can't get into the water by the beach. And the third part is, we all, of course, have our national favorites like cricket, rugby, foodie, and there are plenty of championships and tournaments that Australia has gained a lot of popularity in all of these different kind of sports. Now, having said that, in our university, proudly, and again, one of my favorite points to expand on is that the University of Sydney was represented by 36 athletes and a team manager in the most recent Australian team at the COVID-delayed Tokyo Olympics Games, and another 6 at the Paralympic Games. And they all returned with 8 medals amid many outstanding performances across a host of sporting disciplines. Now, from artistic swimming to athletics and through to hockey, karate, rowing, triathlons, the University of Sydney students did make a mark on the global sporting platform. Now, moving on from that to the academics as well, the University of Sydney is ranked very, very highly. And when I say highly, it's the world's top 4th best degree in sports sciences and exercise and physiology sciences. Now, also having said that, the question that I receive a lot is that if the university is so well ranked and if there is so much to do in the field of sports and fitness, why don't we have sports scholarship? Now, that's a separate question which John has already very kindly answered. But adding to that, once you become a student at the University of Sydney, you get all sorts of support that you require to excel in these areas, in these sports of your interests. In the University of Sydney, we have an Olympic-sized swimming pool. We have a tennis court, like 4 to 5 tennis courts at the moment. There are 3 gyms, and each gym is equipped with different types of fitness tools and equipments. So, and of course, there are free grounds where students are always playing football or cricket or hockey. Indoor sports like squash and badminton is also there. So you name it and you have it. And till date, the University of Sydney has produced over 150 Olympians. And of course, it's counting. And the support that you get is not only from the sporting or the fitness centers in the university, but also from the academics. You definitely do also get scholarships, sports scholarships, which helps you cover a bit of your studies as current students, not probably as incoming students, and also use those funds towards reaching your goal in the sporting field. So yes, that's a little bit about what we do and our caliber in this field. But I'm sure the similar kind of expertise and caliber exists all across the universe, like all across Australia and other universities as well.
Thank you so much. Definitely a lot of opportunities within the sporting field and obviously outside of sporting as well with clubs and societies. So there is something for everyone, which seems to be a bit of the theme going forward. So moving to a new country and a new education system is, of course, a very daunting experience. And each of our universities do provide a very comprehensive student support and orientation program of activities to support the students as they transition through to studying in Australia. Beldina, can you tell us about some of the types of student support or orientation programs that we have here in Australia that support our international students?
Hope, that's an excellent question. Yes, I will. I will say support is such a big deal, especially for international students when they're going to study out there. Of course, the support starts from the school counselors and how they support their students to be able to get to study within Australia, to pick a subject and to be able to work towards it. But as they support within the university starts even when the student is still within their home country. And this begins even with support in enrollment, support in knowing details about their travel and giving more information for example, with Griffith, usually a student can chat directly with that student within the university themselves and ask questions about accommodation, ask questions about lifestyle and what life is like within the university. And that offers support a lot for international students. And now, upon arrival, usually you'll find with most universities within Australia, they're keen to make sure that the student is able to adjust really well. So there's usually an orientation week, and there's a lot of focus that goes towards orientation, especially for international students. And it's answering all sorts of questions, because we understand that by the time a student is coming from high school, usually they've probably never lived alone, or they've possibly not as well been able to adjust to a new environment long term. So the universities work really, really hard to make sure that this student gets the best base, especially during orientation. And some of the things you find being given out during orientation is details to do with their studies, which blocks to be able to study in. Most universities you find will have a peer that is able to support the student during this session and during this transition especially. The second one works especially in terms of the offices that are available for our international students. So for most Australian universities, one thing you'll find is that they have a dedicated team, what we'd call international student advisors for students, to allow them to be able to know the details about their studies, if they have questions about their visas, if they have question about transition and stuff to do with education. It works really well to their advantage as well. The third one I'd mention as well is the internship and industry placement. I cannot put enough emphasis on this. I know it was covered previously when we talked about internships incorporated within the studies. However, I must talk about the fact that these internships not only allow students to be able to explore and figure out the placements they get, figure out what they like about their program. What they tend to do is that they get enough exposure such that they're able to even build relationships. At Griffith, we're experiencing such a high integration rate for students from their internships where they tend to intern. They're actually incorporated within the companies they tend to intern for, simply because of these exposures that are incorporated within their studies. So most universities you find within Australia will have an internship and industry placement office. Ideally, the goal is also to make sure that they prepare the student. They prepare the student towards how to be able to place themselves for, especially an Australian employer. How do they interview? How do they come up with their CV? What should they mention in there? And ideally, these are things that tend to really set the student apart, especially that way. And I'll talk about this lastly. For me, has to do a lot with the kind of support that students will get also emotionally, and the kind of offices that we have to be able to do this. One of the things, I happen to be also a student, a person who studied outside of Africa, and I was an international student at one point. One of the advantages of having people you can talk to, an office you can go to, things like homesickness are things that most people don't cover, and most students don't think they'll experience when they arrive within a new place. And being able to have offices that support this emotionally as well can help a student really transition. Simple things, I'll tell you, for an African student, ideally, most of the time it will have to do with, where do I have my hair made? Where can I get details of different foods? So having that kind of support can really, really help. So I will say this, with most Australian universities, it does help. Most of them have a lot of support for international students, and this is why we are very excited to talk about Australia. Thank you. Hope.
Thank you so much, Beldina. She's right. Yeah, the support that is available throughout each of the universities really does trickle through, not just with the dedicated support teams, but each of the staff members are very approachable through to the academics, and obviously all of the staff that students encounter. So another key aspect of moving to a new country is finding accommodation. Universities do have plenty of options available for students depending on their budget and the type of experience that they're wanting. So Francis, what type of accommodation does the University of New England have available for their students?
Thank you. This depends really, as you said, on the student's choice of lifestyle. Okay. Some students do want to live on campus, and for students who are actually doing undergraduate, I highly encourage them to go on campus. Why? Because they're all into an on-campus accommodation, and there's other students who are just like them on their first day. So it's really easy to make friendship because you're all on the same page. You've all just arrived, as opposed to going in the newest one and people already have relationships that they've formed over years. So on-campus accommodation across most universities, some universities I know it's mandatory for their undergraduate year ones to stay on campus, or they do highly recommend it. Some other universities, it's optional, but on-campus accommodation is one that that is available in most universities, and I really do encourage students to take opportunity and live that first few years on campus. I think someone mentioned before as well that during your undergraduate, it's your years to have fun, to explore yourself, and to really just really take the heat off what high school was. So on-campus offers a good option. The second option is for those students who do not want to stay on campus. We do have what they call third-party student accommodation centers, and these are buildings and companies that have done really well in building student-centric accommodation facilities. Most of the people within that complex will be students. They may not be from one particular university, or they might be from a few different universities. But again, these centers, these accommodation facilities are built so that they cater for international students. Some of them have like mini libraries, they have study areas, they have shared kitchen facilities. So that's another really good option. For example, if a student does not want to stay on campus and they want to stay outside of campus. The third option for students is to live with family and friends out of campus. If they have family, an additional bonus, so they can live with them if they're close enough to the university or somewhere that the student can commute to and from, and that saves them on the cost of living as well. But if that's not a possibility, some students, after staying on campus for 1 or 2 years, they then have some really good friends and they say, hey, how about the 3 of us or 4 of us go and rent an apartment outside of uni. That tends to be a little bit cheaper because they're sharing the cost. But again, as Beldina mentioned, those first few years are really important, and living on campus just gives those students a lot more in terms of being able to plug in what the university has and the system, that support network, and everything else that the university puts on to make sure that students succeed. So those are the 3 main options. The cost across on-campus accommodation ranges, as I explained earlier. Some universities in regional towns, affordable. UNE 1 week is $160 a week. In the bigger universities could be a whole lot more, but discuss with the student as well as a counselor to understand what their budgets are, what their preferences are, what's really important to them when it comes to living on campus, because even living on campus has different options, where some of them are housings where they share common areas, some of them are self studios where self-contained. So discuss with them to just understand as well what they really want and what their preferences are, and hopefully then we can support them from you to us on what they're really looking for. I hope that gives you an idea. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Francis. Okay, so students may also ask you or be curious about their work opportunities whilst they're studying in Australia. John, can you explain to us whether international students are eligible to work, and if so, how can they go about finding a job?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important for students to have that work experience in Australia whilst they're studying, for several reasons, really. It's a really good way to start their networking journey, whether that's just in a more informal aspect. But whilst they're studying, students can certainly work. So in terms of rules and regulations, now, prior to COVID, it was always 20 hours per week during their semester, and then unlimited during their holidays. Now, during the pandemic, the government did change the rules for the amount of hours that students were allowed to work, and it became unlimited hours. This, however, will change later. The rules will change. Unfortunately, the universities haven't been told how many hours what that will be, but we would assume that it will go back to 20 hours or maybe even more. So as soon as that announcement is made, then both Study Australia and all the universities will reach out to you and let you know, so you can then obviously update your students. And in terms of sort of what that work looks like, obviously the students that are working whilst they're studying, we can help with that. So the universities will have different centres within campus that can help students gain that employment. And like I say, whether that's part-time whilst they're studying, it might be a casual job, working in hospitality, for example. So in Melbourne, we have more cafes and restaurants per capita than any other city of the world. So we're always looking for good baristas and good staff that can help, and we can help with that. Importantly as well, Australia has the highest minimum wage of any country in the world. So the salaries that the students will get, probably won't help pay their school fees, but it will certainly help with their living costs while they're living in Australia. Then obviously the more professional aspects. So if you're looking at opportunities towards the end of their degree and also for after studying, and Francis mentioned earlier about the post-study work rights, we can also assist with that whilst they're studying. So whether it's through networking events, meeting with industry, or importantly, internships. It's really, really important that students can start that networking journey even from day one, whether they meet a peer mentor or a fellow student from their first year. You just never know who you might end up working with in 10 years' time. So networking, really, really important. And the universities can definitely help students with their working, internships, and a whole range of networking events as well.
Thanks, John. Networking is definitely key to finding success whilst you're at uni, and also whilst, once you've graduated, and accessing a really broad alumni network. And that's probably something else that, students also have at their fingertips. And, even before they've come to Australia, accessing the alumni network that's that have studied in Australia and have already returned to Australia. So I can see that there have been some questions coming through the Q&A. If there are any other questions, please don't forget to log them through the Q&A box. We do have a few minutes left before this session ends. But in the meantime, I do have a question about, I guess, the international experience. So Joimini, I am going to pick on you because I know that you were an international student in Australia. So what was your favourite thing about, coming to Australia and being a new international student? Like, what would you say would be the best thing that you'd love other students to know?
Well, that's a question which takes me down the memory lane, but definitely the one that I would want to revisit time and again. So when I came here as an international student from India, the first thing which I noticed, and I think which really impressed me a lot, was the free flow of communication that I would have and that I could have with the professors at the university. All the professors and all the support staff, including the recruitment staff who recruited me some many years ago, everybody was always there. Everybody was always kind of there to support you at just one email or just one phone call. So I think that really kind of gave me a lot of confidence and made me realize that, yes, I can survive here. And it's not as scary to move to a new country and to start everything over again as much as I thought it would be. The professors here, the first thing that I also noticed that we address them by their names and not with sir or ma'am or something, no official titles, which kind of eased a lot of the, or in other words, it kind of broke a lot of ice already. There was like no that kind of a barrier in between somebody who's had like 25 years of academic excellence and a very experienced professor versus the classmates or the peers or myself. So I would ask questions more freely. I would involve in class discussions more freely. And I would not be scared to kind of exchange or share ideas. It was very easy to kind of work in group discussions and group presentations, especially in the classrooms, because most of the students, and I shared the classroom with students from 160 other different countries, including domestic students in Australia. And that's how a typical classroom kind of looks like in Australia. And I've seen that across all my other friends' classrooms, my own classroom, and the classrooms that I see now in this capacity. So I think having that global exposure and being able to understand different cultures and different values and different working styles of people from so many ethnocultural backgrounds really does open up a lot of new ideas and creative ideas. And have, like, working with so many different types of people, working on one particular presentation or one particular group discussion, You learn so many different things. And the best part is the professor is always there facilitating these kind of discussions and throwing in a lot of the brainstorming to you, and not himself giving out every information or all kinds of details out to you. So you do a lot of your own research. Definitely the classrooms here kind of pushes you to think, and you really have to do your own research after you're done with your classes when you go back home. Also the kind of flexibility that I got, in bit of, like the work-life balance in a student life. That is, we only had probably 4 classes or 5 classes maximum um, in a week, and the rest of the time was completely up to us on how we would want to utilize our time. And if you want to do your research, or if you want to go out to do your part-time work, it was completely your choice. So yes, the flexibility is something that I really, really enjoyed and appreciated. More than happy for anybody else to jump in and add to this.
Thank you so much. I think we've got time for a quick question that's come through from the audience. So the question is from Raffles World Academy. Thank you for sending it through. Do you recommend students working while completing their program? Because many of the parents feel like they get distracted from the studies and they prefer their students to only focus on the studies. What is your experience with this scenario? So throwing this one out to the panel for whoever would like to take this one. Don't all jump in at once. Sure, Francis, go for it.
To be honest, I think that's a question that a lot of parents worry about. But I think really finding a good balance between the two is the way to go. Or whether that job is a formal job or a casual job, the soft skills that people can learn from just doing their job, and you cannot put value to that. The soft skills are really something that you learn, whether it's a formal and informal job. So really encourage students to just and parents to think about how to balance that, helping students understand, their capabilities. They don't have to do the 20 hours just because it's 20 hours allowance. They can do 5 hours, they can do 10 hours. I think striking the right balance is the way to go, but I think it's an opportunity that should not be missed because of the networks, the people you meet, the exposure, and the soft skills you learn from those type of employments.
Thank you, Francis. That is a great answer. So that is pretty much all the time we do have for today. So I do want to thank everyone for their questions. And on behalf of Study Australia, I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. And I would like to especially thank our panelists for your insights and your comments as well. When you do leave the session today, there will be a short survey and your feedback is appreciated. Following on from this session, we will be sharing a copy of the recording along with a copy of the slides from the presentation as well. If you do have further questions, I encourage you to head to the exhibition hall and visit our panelists and all of our other universities who are represented there today. You can live chat with those representatives from all of these institutions at the booths and make sure to download any of their resources that they have made available to you. So that is all from me and the panel today, but thank you again for your time and we do look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much. Bye.